My name is Claire Whitaker, and I was 33 years old the Christmas my grandmother destroyed my family with one sentence. It happened at the dinner table, right after my mother handed me a pen. The house smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon candles, pine needles, and the kind of old family lie that had been polished so many times everyone had started mistaking it for tradition. Snow tapped softly against the windows. Bing Crosby played low from the speaker by the fireplace. My father sat at the head of the table like a judge. My mother smiled too brightly beside him. And across from me sat Caleb, the boy I had been told my whole life to call my brother, even though everyone said he was really my cousin. Caleb was 35, handsome in the easy way men get to be when the whole family has spent decades making excuses for them. He had my father's square jaw. My mother's Christmas sweater hugged his shoulders like she had bought it for a son she never questioned loving. His fiancée, Abby, sat beside him, silent and nervous, twisting her napkin under the table. Then my mother slid a folder toward me. "Just a little paperwork," she said. That was the first warning. I work as a paralegal for an estate attorney in Columbus. I read wills, trusts, deeds, probate files, and family agreements for a living. I have seen siblings smile over funeral casseroles while stealing from each other before the grave flowers wilted. So when someone says just a little paperwork, what they usually mean is, please don't read what we're trying to take from you. I opened the folder. Inside was a quitclaim deed and a family settlement agreement. According to the papers, I was supposed to sign away any future claim to my grandmother Eleanor's house so Caleb could have it after she died. My grandmother was still alive. She was sitting 3 seats away from me, thin and pale in a blue cardigan, her hands trembling around a glass of water. No one looked at her. That was the second warning. My father cleared his throat. "Caleb needs stability," he said. My mother reached over and touched my wrist with 2 cold fingers. "You have your career, Claire. You're doing fine. Caleb has always needed a little more from this family." There it was, the sentence I had heard in one form or another since I was 4 years old. Caleb needs more. When Caleb got the bigger bedroom, he needed it more. When my college savings vanished, he needed transportation more. When I worked weekends through high school while he got a used truck with a red bow on the hood, he had already lost enough. When I complained, my mother would lower her voice and say, "Claire, he already lost one mother. Don't be cruel." That was the story. Caleb was my cousin, my Aunt Marlene's son. Marlene had supposedly abandoned him when he was a toddler because she was unstable, selfish, and not made for motherhood. My parents had taken him in and raised him as my brother, and I, the actual daughter in the house, was expected to spend my life being grateful for the privilege of coming second. I looked at the papers. Then I looked at my grandmother. She was staring at the folder like it was a loaded gun. "I'm not signing this tonight," I said. The room changed, not loudly, not at first. My father's jaw tightened, my mother's smile thinned. Caleb leaned back in his chair like I had slapped him. "Of course you're making this difficult," my father said. "I'm reading it," I replied. "There's a difference." My mother's eyes filled with tears so quickly it felt rehearsed. "After everything this family has done for Caleb, you would really take this from him?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I finally understood how tired I was of being asked to donate pieces of my life to a debt I had never created. Then Grandma Eleanor lifted her spoon and tapped it once against her glass. The sound was small, but every person at that table froze. My grandmother looked at my father first, then my mother, then Caleb. Finally, she looked at me. Her voice shook, but the words did not. "Enough," she said. "That boy was never abandoned." My mother whispered, "Mom, please don't." Grandma ignored her. She turned toward Caleb, and for the first time in my life, I saw pity in her face that was not aimed at him alone. "He was hidden," she said. No one breathed. Caleb's fork slipped from his hand and hit the plate with a sharp, ugly sound. My father stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "Eleanor," he warned. But my grandmother was done being warned. She pointed one thin finger at the folder in front of me. "You will not take from Claire again to pay for what you did." That was the moment Christmas ended. Not with shouting, not with broken plates, not yet. It ended with my father's face going gray, my mother covering her mouth, Caleb looking like the ground had opened under him, and me realizing that the boy I had been raised to sacrifice for was never just my cousin. He was the family's secret, and I had almost signed away the last thing they hadn't already taken. Before that Christmas dinner, before my grandmother tapped her spoon against her glass and split our family history open in front of everyone, Caleb Whitaker had been my brother in every way that made my life harder. That was how my mother liked to say it. He is your brother in every way that matters, Claire. She said it when I was 6, and he took the blue bicycle my father had promised would be mine once I grew into it. She said it when I was 9, and Caleb got the bedroom with 2 windows because he needed space to adjust. She said it when I was 12, and I found him in my room, reading my diary out loud to his friends, laughing so hard he had tears in his eyes. He has been through enough, my mother told me that night, standing in my doorway with her arms crossed. You don't need to make everything harder. That was the first lesson I learned in the Whitaker house. Pain counted differently depending on who was holding it. Caleb's pain was a family emergency. Mine was an attitude problem. The official story was simple. My Aunt Marlene, my mother's younger sister, had given birth to Caleb when she was 23. According to my parents, Marlene was unstable, selfish, too wild to settle down, the kind of woman who could love a baby for a week and then disappear when love became work. When Caleb was still small, she left him with my parents just for a few days and never came back. That was the version I grew up with. My mother told it with her mouth tight, like Marlene's name tasted bitter. My father told it with quiet disappointment, the way men in church basements talk about broken women they think they are generous for pitying, and Caleb absorbed it the way children absorb weather. He never had to ask for anything directly. The room adjusted around him. If there was one piece of cake left, Caleb got it. If there was a school trip only one of us could afford, Caleb went. If there was blame to be placed, it somehow slid past him and landed on me. Claire is strong, my father would say. She can handle disappointment. I used to think strength was something good. In our house, it was a receipt they used every time they took something from me. By high school, I'd become very good at wanting quietly. I wanted new shoes, so I bought them with babysitting money. I wanted help with college applications, so I asked my guidance counselor. I wanted my mother to look at me the way she looked at Caleb when he walked into the room, like his presence alone had healed some wound in her. Eventually, I stopped wanting that one. It was too expensive, and there was no job in Columbus that paid enough to buy it. Caleb was not cruel all the time. That would have made things easier. Sometimes he was funny. Sometimes he drove me to school when it rained. Sometimes he let me sit beside him on the porch steps and talked about leaving Ohio one day, getting a house with a wraparound deck and a dog that didn't listen to anyone. He could be warm when he was not being watched. But the moment my parents entered a room, he became the boy who had lost a mother, and I became the girl who had no right to need one. The worst year was my senior year. Grandma Eleanor had always told me there was money set aside for college. Not a fortune, but enough to cover books, a used car, maybe the gap between scholarships and tuition. She had started the account when I was born, she said, because girls in our family needed escape routes disguised as opportunities. Education is a key, she told me once, slipping a $20 bill into my coat pocket after Thanksgiving dinner. Don't ever hand yours to someone who promises to hold it for you. I loved my grandmother, but back then I didn't understand how warnings could sound like advice. 2 months before graduation, my father sat me down at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad in front of him. That was never a good sign. My mother stood at the sink, rinsing a coffee mug that was already clean. Caleb was outside in the driveway, leaning against a used red pickup with a white bow still taped to the hood. I remember that bow. It was December. Dirty snow had hardened along the curb. The truck looked ridiculous and beautiful, like every easy thing I had never been given. My father cleared his throat. We had to make some decisions, he said. I looked from him to my mother. What decisions? My mother didn't turn around. Family decisions, she said. That was another phrase I learned to distrust. Family decision meant everyone else had already voted, and I was being informed how much it would cost me. The college account was gone. Not all at once, they said, not carelessly. Things had come up. Caleb needed transportation for his technical program. There had been bills, repairs, emergencies. They spoke in soft, vague words, the kind people use when they want the shape of a truth without the weight of it. I asked how much was left. My father looked down at the legal pad. "Claire," he said, "you're smart. You'll get scholarships." Outside, Caleb honked the truck horn once, probably by accident. My mother flinched. I stared at the window over the sink and saw his reflection in the glass. He was smiling. I did not scream then. I wish I had a more dramatic memory for you, but I don't. I just sat there and felt something inside me go very still. There are moments when a child stops waiting to be chosen. Not because it doesn't hurt anymore, because the waiting becomes embarrassing. I left home 3 months later with 2 suitcases, a partial scholarship, and a list of campus jobs printed from the library computer. No one helped me move. Caleb said he would, then forgot because my father needed him to pick up lumber from Home Depot. My mother cried when I left, but even then, the tears felt like something she was doing for herself. "You'll understand someday," she said, hugging me hard enough to hurt. Family is sacrifice. I remember pulling back and thinking, no, family is where sacrifice is supposed to go both ways. I built my life in Columbus slowly. Community college first, then night classes, then a paralegal certificate. I got a job filing probate documents for an estate attorney named Janet Brooks, a woman who wore pearl earrings, drank terrible coffee, and could read a trust amendment like other people read gossip. From Janet, I learned that families lie best when money is involved. They lie with casseroles in their hands. They lie in hospital waiting rooms. They lie beside open caskets and say things like, "This is what Mom would have wanted," while holding documents Mom never saw. They use words like fairness, healing, tradition, and peace when what they really mean is ownership. I became good at documents because documents did not care who cried first. A deed was a deed. A signature was a signature. A date either matched or it didn't. Numbers were not kind, but they were honest. By 33, I had a small apartment, a reliable car, and a reputation at work for being calm in ugly situations. That was what people called me when they didn't know me well. Calm. They did not know calm was just what survived after asking for too much got trained out of me. A week before Christmas, my mother called. I knew something was wrong because she used her sweet voice. "Claire, honey," she said, dragging the word honey across the line like a ribbon over a trap. "We're all getting together at Grandma's this year. It may be her last Christmas in the house." I sat at my desk, a stack of estate inventories beside my elbow. "Is Grandma okay?" "She's 82, my mother said. She has good days and bad days." That was not an answer. "What does her doctor say?" A pause. "You always go straight to questions." I almost smiled. At work, that was considered a skill. My mother sighed. "Just come home. Caleb will be there. Abby, too. Your father wants everyone together. There's also a small legal matter we should handle while the family is in one place." There it was. The temperature in my office seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What legal matter?" "Nothing dramatic," she said quickly. "Just some paperwork for the house. Grandma doesn't need confusion at her age." I looked down at the probate file in front of me, where 3 siblings were currently fighting over their dead father's fishing boat. "Send it to me first," I said. My mother laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Claire, don't be difficult. It's family." I closed the file. "That's why I want to read it." Another pause. Longer this time. Then her voice changed. The sweetness stayed, but something colder stepped behind it. "Caleb needs this," she said. "Please don't make Christmas about you." I stared at the wall of my office, at the framed certificate I had paid for one night class at a time, and felt that old stillness return. Caleb needs this. My whole childhood in 3 words. I told her I would be there. Then I hung up and wrote the phrase on a yellow sticky note, not because I needed to remember it, but because that is what I do when something doesn't fit. I write it down. I give it a place. I wait to see what else attaches to it. On Christmas Eve, I drove back to the town I had spent 15 years trying to outgrow. Snow moved softly across the highway. Houses appeared with white lights along their roofs and plastic reindeer glowing on their lawns. Everything looked peaceful in the way small towns look peaceful when you are only passing through. Grandma Eleanor's house sat at the end of Maple Ridge Lane, warm and bright behind a row of bare oak trees. I parked at the curb and stayed in my car for a moment. Through the front window, I could see Caleb standing near the fireplace with my father. Same square jaw, same easy posture. My mother was adjusting the collar of his sweater like he was still a boy who needed fixing before company saw him. Then Caleb laughed at something my father said, and my father clapped him on the shoulder. A family portrait, if you didn't know where to look. I knew where to look. I looked for Grandma. I found her in the corner near the Christmas tree, small in her blue cardigan, watching the room with the expression of someone who had heard a noise in the walls and was waiting for everyone else to notice. Then the front door opened. My mother stood there in red lipstick and pearls, smiling like she had practiced. "Claire," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like vanilla perfume and warning. "Please behave tonight." I stepped back and looked at her. She lowered her voice. "Caleb needs this." And for the first time in my life, I wondered what this actually was. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside Grandma Eleanor's house was that every photograph had been rearranged. That may sound like a small thing. In some families it would have been. But my grandmother's mantel had always been a museum of our lives, dusty silver frames lined up in strict chronological order. My mother as a little girl with missing front teeth. Aunt Marlene at 16. Barefoot on the dock at Lake Erie, laughing into the sun. My parents on their wedding day. Caleb in a baseball uniform. Me holding a spelling bee trophy that my father had called nice before changing the subject to Caleb's little league game. The mantel had always told the story of our family, or at least the version Grandma had been willing to display. Now Aunt Marlene was almost gone. Not completely. That would have been too obvious. But the large photo of her by the lake was missing. The framed picture of my mother and Marlene in matching Easter dresses had been moved behind a ceramic angel. A Christmas photo from years before I was born had been turned slightly, so Marlene's face was half hidden in the glare from the tree lights. I stood there with my coat still on and felt the first click of something fitting into place. People don't hide the dead unless the dead are still saying something. "Claire," my father called from the dining room. "Don't hover in the doorway." He said it the same way he used to say, "Don't sulk," when I was a child. A command dressed as observation. I took off my coat and hung it beside Caleb's. His was expensive, charcoal wool, still carrying the sharp, clean smell of a department store. Mine was black and practical, the same one I wore to work when probate hearings required me to look more serious than tired. Caleb came over with a glass of wine in his hand. "Hey, little sister," he said. He had called me that since we were kids, usually when he wanted something softened before he asked for it. "Caleb," I said. His smile flickered, but he recovered quickly. He looked older than I remembered from Thanksgiving, though not in a bad way. More polished, better haircut, nicer watch. A man preparing to look responsible in front of lenders, relatives, and maybe himself. Abby appeared beside him. I liked Abby. In the cautious way you like someone you suspect has not been told the whole story. She had kind eyes and the posture of a woman who had already learned where the fault lines in this family were and was trying not to step too hard. "Merry Christmas," she said, hugging me lightly. "Merry Christmas." Her eyes moved toward the folder tucked under my mother's arm across the room, then away again. That was the third warning. Dinner began the way family performances always begin, with too much food and too many smiles. My mother had made turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, honey carrots, cranberry sauce from a can because my father liked the ridges, and 3 pies no one needed. Christmas music played softly from the speaker near the fireplace. The tree blinked gold and red in the corner. Snow moved past the windows like someone shaking powdered sugar over a postcard. At the head of the table, my grandmother barely touched her plate. She looked smaller than she had in September. Her silver hair was pinned neatly, but her skin had the thin, papery look of someone who had spent too much energy pretending not to be afraid. Every few minutes, her eyes moved to me, then to the folder, then to my father. I wanted to ask if she was all right. I wanted to take her into the kitchen, close the door, and let the room stop performing around her. But my mother kept the conversation moving like a hostess guiding guests away from a stain in the carpet. Caleb and Abby found a house they love, she announced. Caleb looked down, modest in the way people are modest when they know praise is coming. It's not final, he said. But it's perfect for them, my mother continued. 3 bedrooms, good school district, fenced yard, the kind of place where a family can really begin. Abby smiled politely. It's beautiful, just expensive. My father gave a heavy sigh, the kind meant to make everyone ask what burden he was carrying. That's the problem now, he said. Young families can barely get started unless someone helps them. I set my fork down. There are sentences that enter a room wearing shoes you recognize. My mother glanced at me. Of course, no one is saying Caleb expects anything. No one had to. Expectation had been seated at that table long before I arrived. Caleb shifted in his chair. I don't want this to be weird. Then don't make it weird, I said quietly. My mother's eyes sharpened. Grandma Eleanor coughed into her napkin and my father immediately turned toward her. Mom, you should eat. I'm not hungry, she said. You need your strength. For what? She asked. The question landed harder than it should have. My father's expression tightened. For the holidays. Grandma looked at him for a long second, then lowered her eyes. After dinner, my mother insisted we move to the living room for coffee and pie, which meant the real conversation was about to begin. In my family, bad news was never delivered at the table. It was placed gently in your lap after dessert, when everyone was full enough to feel guilty refusing anything. My grandmother sat in her wingback chair by the tree. Caleb and Abby took the sofa. My father stood by the fireplace with one arm along the mantel, blocking half the photographs behind him. My mother placed the folder on the coffee table. Then she smiled at me. Claire, honey, since you understand legal language, this should be simple. Simple. Another word people use when they want you to skip the part where they explain themselves. I picked up the folder and opened it. The top page was titled Family Settlement Agreement. Under it was a quitclaim deed prepared for my signature. The property description matched Grandma Eleanor's house on Maple Ridge Lane. The language was clean enough, but the intention was not. I was being asked to waive any present or future claim connected to the property, the trust, or any proceeds from sale or transfer. In return, I would receive $1 and the family's continued goodwill. I read that phrase twice. Continued goodwill. Apparently, my inheritance had been appraised at $1 and permission to remain invited to Christmas. No, I said. My mother blinked. You haven't even finished reading. I read enough. My father stepped away from the mantel. Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm declining to sign a deed transferring rights I haven't had independently reviewed. Caleb's face colored. Nobody is trying to cheat you. I looked at him. Then nobody should mind waiting. Abby lowered her eyes. My mother pressed a hand to her chest, and I recognized the opening movement of a familiar performance. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said. What were you afraid of? That you would turn your grandmother's final Christmas in this house into a legal fight. Grandma Eleanor's hand tightened around the arm of her chair. I saw it. So did my father. He moved first, crossing the room with a speed that seemed casual only if you didn't know him. He stood beside Grandma's chair, one hand resting on the back of it. Mom wants peace, he said. Grandma did not look at him. I kept my voice even. Grandma hasn't said what she wants. The room went very still. My mother let out a small laugh. Claire, your grandmother is tired. We've discussed this as a family. As a family, I repeated. My father's mouth flattened. You were invited here tonight to be part of that discussion. No, I was invited here to sign something that was already prepared. Caleb stood then. Not aggressively, not exactly, but he stood with the confidence of someone who had never had to wonder whether the room would make space for him. Claire, come on, he said. You live in Columbus. You have a career. You don't want this old house. I looked at the Christmas tree, at the handmade ornaments, at the worn floorboards, at the doorway where Grandma used to measure our heights in pencil until my mother painted over the marks because they made the trim look messy. You don't know what I want, I said. His jaw tightened. You never wanted anything to do with this family until there was property involved. That one got through. Not because it was true, because it was the kind of lie that had been fed well enough to stand upright on its own. I turned to my mother. Is that what you told him? She looked away. Caleb gave a bitter laugh. You left, Claire. I left because there was no room for me. There was always room. No, I said. There was always a couch, a plate, and an expectation that I would be grateful for whatever was left. My father's voice cut across the room. Enough. That single word had ruled my childhood. Enough meant stop asking, stop noticing, stop making your discomfort inconvenient to people who had already decided what they needed from you. For a second, I was 17 again at the kitchen table, watching my college account disappear into vague family emergencies while Caleb's truck shone red in the driveway. Then Grandma Eleanor spoke. She's right. It was barely louder than the fire crackling in the hearth. My mother turned sharply. Grandma lifted her head. She is right. My father's hand tightened on the chair. Mom, you're tired. No, Harold, she said. I have been tired for 35 years. The room went quiet in a way that had weight. I looked at her, really looked. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. Not confused, not drifting. Clear in the terrible way people become clear when they have finally run out of time to lie. My father leaned down slightly. This is not the time. Grandma looked up at him. That is what you said when Marlene was pregnant. The words entered the room and took all the oxygen with them. Caleb's face went blank. Abby whispered his name. My mother stood so quickly her coffee cup rattled against the saucer. Mom, don't. Grandma Eleanor ignored her. Her gaze moved to me, and there was something like apology in it. Not enough to heal anything. Enough to warn me that whatever came next would change the shape of everything behind it. Claire, she said, there is a red tin box in the hall cabinet, behind the Christmas linens. My father stepped in front of me. You are not going through my mother's things. I looked at him, then at the folder on the coffee table, then back at him. You were comfortable going through mine. His face hardened. For the first time that night, Caleb sounded scared. What is she talking about? No one answered him. That was the answer. I moved toward the hallway. My father caught my arm, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to remind me he still thought his body could become a locked door. I looked down at his hand. Let go. Then Grandma Eleanor's voice cut through the room, thin but sharp as broken glass. Harold, if you touch that girl again, I will say it before she opens the box. My father released me. I walked to the hall cabinet with my pulse steady in my ears. Behind a stack of embroidered Christmas table runners, I found it. A red tin box with faded snowmen painted on the lid, the kind of box people use for cookies, buttons, recipes, or evidence. When I carried it back into the living room, my mother had gone completely white. Caleb was standing now, too. Grandma pointed to the coffee table. Open it there, she said, where everyone can see. My hands did not shake until I lifted the lid. Inside were envelopes, photographs, folded hospital papers, and a small blue baby bracelet sealed in a plastic bag. On the top envelope in my grandmother's handwriting were 2 words, for Claire. I looked at Grandma. She nodded once. And somewhere behind me, my father whispered a word I had never heard from him before. Please. That was when I knew. Whatever was inside that box was not family history. It was the part of the truth they had buried because it could still identify the body. The first thing I saw inside the red tin box was a photograph. Not a formal one. Not the kind people frame and place on mantles after deciding which version of themselves they want visitors to believe in. This one was creased at the corner, faded at the edges, and taken in hospital lighting so harsh it made everyone look guilty. Aunt Marlene sat upright in a bed, her hair dark and tangled around her face, a thin blue blanket pulled to her waist. In her arms was a newborn baby with a wrinkled face and a hospital bracelet around one tiny ankle. Behind her stood my father, not near the door, not at a polite distance, not like a brother-in-law visiting because family obligations required it. He stood close enough that one hand rested on Marlene's shoulder, close enough that anyone looking at that photo would understand the truth before a single word was spoken. I heard Caleb inhale behind me. "What is that?" he asked. No one answered. I lifted the photograph and turned it over. On the back, in Grandma Eleanor's narrow handwriting, were 5 words. Marlene and Caleb, St. Agnes, 1989. My throat closed. Caleb stepped forward and took the photo from my hand. His face did not change at first. That was worse than if he had shouted. He stared at it the way a person stares at a familiar house after a fire, trying to understand which walls are still standing. "That's my mother," he said. His voice was flat. My mother made a small sound. "Caleb." He looked up. "And that's Harold." Not Dad, Harold. My father's face hardened, and for one strange second I thought he might still try to deny that a photograph was a photograph. Then Grandma Eleanor spoke from her chair. "His father," she said. The room broke without anyone moving. Abby covered her mouth. Caleb's hand dropped to his side, the photograph trembling between his fingers. My mother sat down slowly, like her knees had forgotten their job. My father stood very still beside the fireplace, one hand gripping the mantel hard enough that his knuckles went white. I looked at Grandma. She had been waiting 35 years to say those words, and the saying had not made her lighter. If anything, she seemed smaller, crushed under the weight of finally setting the truth down. "Say it clearly," I said. My mother snapped her head toward me. "Claire, don't." But I was not looking at her. I was looking at my grandmother. For most of my life, every important thing in that family had been said sideways, in hints, in warnings, in little comments that taught you where not to step. I had built an entire personality around translating half-sentences. Not tonight. Grandma Eleanor nodded once. "Caleb is Harold's son," she said. "Marlene was his mother, not just his aunt. His mother. And she did not abandon him." Caleb made a sound I cannot describe. Not a sob, not a laugh. Something in between, sharp and wounded. My father finally moved. "That is enough," he said. Grandma turned toward him with a look I had never seen on her face before. Not regret, judgment. "No, Harold. Enough was when you touched my younger daughter while married to my older one. Enough was when she got pregnant. Enough was when we all decided a baby could be rearranged like furniture so nobody had to admit what kind of man you were." My mother stood again. "Don't you dare act like you weren't part of it." Grandma closed her eyes briefly. "I was part of it," she said. "That is why I'm telling it now." There it was. Not innocence, not heroism, a confession. That was the thing about truth. It did not always arrive clean. Sometimes it came wearing the fingerprints of the people who had hidden it. I set the red tin box on the coffee table and began removing the documents one by one because my hands needed something to do. A hospital discharge form, a copy of a birth certificate, a yellowed envelope with St. Agnes Medical Center printed in the corner, several letters tied with a blue ribbon, a small plastic bag holding the baby bracelet. The name on the bracelet was not Caleb Whitaker. It was Nathaniel M. Reed. I read it twice. "Nathaniel?" I said. Caleb looked at me like I had spoken from underwater. Grandma's face crumpled. "Marlene named him Nathaniel," she said. She wanted to call him Nate. Caleb laughed then once, a terrible empty sound. "My name isn't even my name." Abby reached for his arm. He stepped away from her without seeming to realize he had done it. My father's voice dropped into the tone he used when he wanted the room to remember he was the one who paid the bills, fixed the roof, decided what was respectable. Names can be changed. Families make decisions. We did what had to be done. I looked at him. "No," I said. "You did what made your life easier." His eyes cut to me. "You know nothing about it." "I'm looking at it." I picked up the birth certificate copy. The father's name line was blank. The mother's name was Marlene Ann Whitaker. The date matched the photo. The hospital matched the envelope. The baby bracelet matched the name no one had ever said at our dinner table. Grandma pointed weakly toward the blue ribbon of letters. "She wrote for years," she said. My mother whispered, "Mom, please." "She wrote for years," Grandma repeated, louder this time. "Birthday cards, Christmas letters, apologies she never should have had to make. She begged to see him." Caleb turned slowly toward my mother. "You told me she never asked." Diane Whitaker, my mother, had spent my entire childhood looking wounded on command. She had cried at school concerts, at insurance commercials, at old hymns in church. But the expression on her face now was not grief. It was calculation trying to dress itself as pain. "She was unstable," my mother said. "You don't remember what she was like." Caleb's voice cracked. "I don't remember anything. I was a baby." "She would have ruined you." "No," Grandma said softly. "We ruined enough." My mother spun on her. "You don't get to sit there now and pretend you're better than us. You signed the papers too." Grandma nodded. "I did." "And you took her side?" my mother demanded, pointing at me like I had been the affair, the pregnancy, the forged peace, and the 35-year lie all by myself. Grandma looked at me. I took the wrong side for too long. I did not know what to do with that. Part of me wanted to feel grateful. Another part of me, a younger part, wanted to ask why she had waited until my childhood had already been spent like loose change. Instead, I opened the envelope with my name on it, for Claire. Inside was a bank statement from the year I turned 17. Then another. Then a copy of an account document I had not seen since my father sat me down at the kitchen table and explained that family decisions had emptied the college money Grandma had promised me. The account had been opened in my name. The authorized custodian had been my father. The withdrawals were listed in black ink. $5,000 in March, $3,000 in May, $8,000 in August. The memo lines were mostly blank, but one had a cashier's check copy attached, payable to Stanton & Lowe Family Services. I looked up. What is Stanton & Lowe? No one answered quickly enough. Grandma did. The attorney who arranged Marlene's departure. My stomach turned cold. My mother pressed both hands to her face. It wasn't like that. I held up the paper. It was exactly like this. That was something Janet had taught me in my first year as a paralegal. People can decorate a lie with reasons, but a transaction is still a transaction. Money moved. Someone signed. Someone benefited. My college account had not disappeared into emergencies. It had helped pay for the machinery of silence, for papers, for pressure, for the removal of a woman from her own child's life. And then they had bought Caleb a truck with the rest of it. I looked at him, expecting anger at me because that was the pattern. In our family, pain was passed down until it found the safest person to land on. But Caleb was not looking at me. He was looking at my father. "Did you know?" he asked. My father's mouth tightened. "Caleb, son, don't call me that unless you're ready to answer me." The room went so quiet I could hear the fire settle behind the grate. My father's eyes moved toward my mother, then back to Caleb. Biology is not the only thing that makes a family. It was the kind of sentence that might have sounded noble if it had not been used to hide cowardice. Caleb nodded slowly. "So yes." My father said nothing. That silence did what no confession could have done better. Caleb backed away from the coffee table. He looked at the documents, at the photograph, at the baby bracelet with a name that had belonged to him for only a few days before the adults took even that. Then he looked at me. For once, there was no older brother in his face, no golden sun, no boy the room bent toward, just a man who had opened a box and found out his whole life had been arranged by people who called control protection. "You knew?" he asked me. The question hit harder than I expected. "No," I said. His eyes searched my face like he needed someone in that room to be clean. "I found out when you did." My mother made a bitter sound. "Oh, please, she works in law. She probably planned this." There it was, the pivot. When truth became unavoidable, blame needed a new address. I turned to her. "You handed me a deed before Grandma handed me a box." My mother's face changed. Not much, just enough. Enough for me to understand that the timing had not been an accident. They had known Grandma was weakening. They had known something might come out. They had tried to get my signature before the truth could reach the table. I looked at the quitclaim deed lying beside the old hospital papers. A new theft next to an old one. That was the shape of it. Grandma reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold. "They were going to take the house," she said. Before I could stop them, my father exploded. "No one is taking anything. This house has been in this family for 40 years. Grandma looked at him. "And it will not be used to reward your lie." My mother started crying then, loudly, fully, the kind of crying that had rescued her from accountability my whole life. "I stayed," she said. "Do you understand that? I stayed after what he did. I raised that child. I let people think my sister was trash so my marriage could survive. Do you know what that cost me?" For the first time all night, I felt something like pity for her. Not forgiveness. Pity, because she really believed her suffering had given her permission to spend everyone else's life. "You didn't save your marriage," I said. "You turned it into a crime scene and made us all live in it." Her crying stopped. My father stared at me with open hatred. Caleb picked up the photograph again. His hands were steadier now, which somehow made him look more broken. "I need air," he said. He walked toward the front door. Abby followed, grabbing his coat from the hook. "Caleb," my mother called. He stopped with his hand on the knob but did not turn around. "My name was Nathaniel," he said. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the snow. The cold swept into the house behind him. For a few seconds no one moved. Then Grandma Eleanor leaned back in her chair, exhausted, and looked at me with tears standing in her eyes. "I am sorry," she said. I wanted to ask which part she was sorry for. The affair she helped hide, the mother she helped erase, the brother she helped build out of a cousin, the college money. The years I spent thinking I was selfish because I wanted anything that had not already been promised to Caleb. But I did not ask. Not then. Because the documents were still on the table. And the one thing I had learned from years of estate work was that when a family lie finally opens, you do not close the box because people are crying. You make copies. You preserve the record. You find out what else they took. I looked at the quitclaim deed, at the bank statements, at the baby bracelet, at the photograph of my father standing behind Marlene in a hospital room 3.5 decades ago. Then I looked at my mother. "When were you planning to tell me?" She wiped her face and gave me an answer so honest it was almost generous. "We weren't." That was the last soft thing in me that night. It did not break loudly. It just locked. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was crying. Crying would have made sense. Crying would have been human, maybe even healthy. Instead, I sat at my grandmother's kitchen table at 2:17 in the morning with a cup of coffee gone cold beside my hand, the red tin box open in front of me, and 35 years of family history spread across the table like a body prepared for examination. Hospital papers, old letters, bank statements, a baby bracelet with a name no one had ever said to Caleb's face. Nathaniel M. Reed. I looked at it for a long time. There was a cruelty in taking someone's mother. There was another cruelty in taking his name, a quieter one, more efficient. A name is the first thing the world gives you that belongs only to you, and my family had treated Caleb's like an inconvenient label on a box they needed to repackage. Behind me, the house was finally quiet. Caleb and Abby had left 20 minutes after he walked into the snow. My parents had followed not long after, not because the night was over, but because my father understood the room had turned against him in a way he could not fix with volume. My mother had tried one last performance at the door, trembling in her wool coat, telling me I was being cruel to Grandma, cruel to Caleb, cruel to everyone who had already suffered enough. I had looked at her and said, "You keep saying suffered like it's a receipt." She did not answer. Grandma Eleanor had gone upstairs with my help. She was weak by then, her hand light on my arm, but at the top of the stairs she stopped and looked down at the living room where the tree still blinked gold over the quitclaim deed. "Don't let them take it," she whispered. "The house?" Her eyes filled. "Anything else?" That was the sentence that kept me at the kitchen table. Anything else. Families like mine do not steal once. They practice. They start with small things. A bedroom, a birthday, the last piece of pie. Then they move on to money, names, years, truth. By the time they hand you a pen on Christmas and ask for a house, they've already trained you to feel rude for asking what the document says. I took out my phone and photographed everything, not casually, not emotionally, methodically, front and back of every envelope, close-ups of postage dates, the hospital bracelet beside the birth certificate copy. The photograph of Marlene holding Caleb with my father's hand on her shoulder. The bank statements from my college account. The cashier's check to Stanton and Lowe Family Services. The quitclaim deed they had wanted me to sign. The family settlement agreement promising me $1 and continued goodwill. That phrase would have been funny if I had not been so tired. At 3:04, I sent a message to Janet Brooks. Sorry for the hour. Family emergency involving trust documents, possible undue influence, old custodial account withdrawals, and attempted property transfer. Need guidance. I have original documents in my possession with Grandma's permission. I attached nothing yet. Janet had taught me better than that. Never send sensitive documents from a kitchen table before you know the safest way to preserve them. Her reply came 12 minutes later. Do not sign anything. Do not surrender originals. Photograph storage location. Write timeline while memory is fresh. I'll call it 7. I almost smiled. Some people pray in a crisis. I call an estate attorney. So I made a timeline. I opened my laptop and started with what I knew, not what I felt. 1989, Caleb born at St. Agnes Medical Center under the name Nathaniel M. Reed. 1989, Marlene leaves Ohio, circumstances disputed. 1991, Caleb begins living permanently with Harold and Diane Whitaker. 1995 onward, family represents Marlene as abandoning mother. Year of my birth account. Grandma Eleanor establishes education savings in my name. Senior year, account depleted. Explanation given, family emergencies. Current year, family presents quitclaim deed and settlement agreement asking me to waive future claim to Eleanor's house. Christmas Eve, Eleanor states Caleb is Harold's biological son. Marlene did not abandon him, and prior financial transfers were used to conceal truth. I stared at the list. A lie can feel complicated when you live inside it. On paper, it becomes simple. Money moved, people disappeared, a child was renamed, another child was told to be grateful for what was left. At 7 sharp, Janet called. I was still at the table. The sky outside had turned the pale gray of winter mornings, and the Christmas lights reflected in the dark kitchen window like small, useless warnings. Janet listened without interrupting. That was one of the reasons she was good. Bad lawyers rush toward outrage. Good ones wait until they know where to place it. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. Claire, she said, I need you to hear me very carefully. This is no longer family drama. This is a document preservation problem, a potential undue influence problem, a possible trust interference problem, and depending on how that custodial account was handled, maybe more. I figured. Of course you did. Her voice softened. How is your grandmother? Tired, scared, clear. Good. We'll need that last part documented. They are going to attack her capacity. I looked toward the stairs. They already started last night. Dad kept saying she was tired. Tired is not incompetent, Janet said, but expect them to turn that into a story by noon. She was generous. It happened by 9. My mother called first. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father. Then Caleb. Then my mother again. I listened to the voicemails in order, because order matters. My mother was crying in the first one. Claire, honey, last night was awful. Grandma was confused. You know how old people get when they're exhausted. Please don't make this bigger than it has to be. My father's message came next, low and controlled. You will bring that box back today. Those are not your papers. If you try to involve lawyers, you will embarrass your grandmother and destroy what's left of this family. Then Caleb. His voice was rough. I don't know what to believe. Call me. I played that one twice. Not because it gave me answers, because it was the only message that sounded like pain instead of strategy. I called him back. He answered on the first ring. Did she know where my mother is? He asked. No hello, no warm-up. I think so. Is she alive? I closed my eyes. There are questions that should never have to be asked by a 35-year-old man about the woman who gave birth to him. I don't know yet, I said, but there are letters. Some have return addresses. He was silent for a while, then he said, Mom says Grandma is confused. Your mother said that because Grandma remembered something inconvenient. She is my mother, he snapped. I let the silence sit between us. Then he corrected himself, quieter. Diane, I mean Diane. I looked at the baby bracelet on the table. I'm sorry, Caleb, are you? The question landed harder than I expected. Yes, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like you're already building a case. I am. He gave a bitter laugh. At least you admit it. I'm building a record because they handed me legal documents before they handed you the truth. He said nothing. I continued, keeping my voice steady because anger would have been easier for him to fight. I didn't make Harold your father. I didn't make Diane hide it. I didn't make Marlene disappear. And I didn't empty my own college account to pay someone named Stanton and Lowe. What are you talking about? There it was again. Another piece they had kept from him. I told him about the bank statements, the cashier's check, the withdrawals. Not all of it. Enough. By the time I finished, his breathing had changed. They used your money? They used Grandma set aside for me. For the lie around you. That was the closest I could get to kindness without stepping away from the truth. Caleb whispered something I could not hear. Then he said, I need to find Marlene. I'm going to try. No, he said sharply. I need to. Then don't let Harold and Diane be your source of information anymore. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a full minute. Then I started opening the letters. Most were from Louisville, Kentucky. Same return address for 6 years, then a different apartment, then a P.O. box. The handwriting changed over time. Younger letters slanted hard to the right, crowded with emotion. Later ones were neater, controlled. The kind of handwriting a person develops after learning no one is coming because she asked nicely. The first letter I opened was addressed to Caleb on his 6th birthday. My sweet Nate, I don't know if they will give this to you. I hope they do. I hope you know I did not forget the day you were born. You had a little wrinkle between your eyebrows, like you were already suspicious of the world. I kissed it and told you not to worry, because I was your mother, and I would worry for both of us. I stopped reading, not because it was too emotional, because the envelope had never been opened. The seal was still intact before I broke it. For 30 years, my family had not just lied about Marlene. They had intercepted her love and stored it in a cookie tin. That was when my hands finally started shaking, not from shock, from recognition. I knew what it felt like to send need into that family and have it returned unopened. By noon, Janet had arranged for a courier to collect scanned copies, not originals. She also told me to keep the red tin box in a secure location and document who had access. Grandma signed a short handwritten statement confirming she had given me permission to preserve the contents. Her signature wavered, but it was hers. At 2:30, my father arrived. He did not knock. He used his old key and walked into Grandma's house like ownership was something his body carried. I was in the living room with my laptop open and the red tin box beside me. Grandma was upstairs resting. The quitclaim deed lay on the coffee table in a clear plastic sleeve. My father looked at the sleeve and then at me. "You think you're clever?" "No," I said. "I think you're predictable." His face darkened. "You have no idea what we sacrificed." There it was again. The family religion. Sacrifice. I closed my laptop. "You had an affair with your wife's sister, hid your son, erased his mother, spent money that wasn't yours, and tried to get me to sign away property before Grandma could tell the truth. Which part of that are you calling sacrifice?" For a second, he looked like he might hit me. Not because he would, necessarily, because men like my father sometimes mistake being accurately described for being attacked. Instead, he reached for the red tin box. I moved it behind me. "Don't." His laugh was low and ugly. "You always were dramatic, and you always counted on people being too uncomfortable to stop you." He leaned closer. "If you take this to court, you will lose Caleb forever. You think he's going to thank you for ripping his life apart." I thought of Caleb's voice on the phone, saying my name like it belonged to someone standing too close to the explosion. "No," I said. "I think he deserves to know who lit the fuse." My father stared at me. Then he said the thing that told me Janet was right. "Your grandmother is not well. Any lawyer worth a damn will see that." I wrote it down in my head. Attack capacity. Step 1. He saw me understand, and for the first time all day, uncertainty moved across his face. I had seen that look before at work, on people who thought legal language was a costume until someone in the room actually knew how to read it. I stood. "You should leave. This is my mother's house, and she asked you to leave it last night." He did not move. So I picked up my phone and called Janet on speaker. My father's expression changed when she answered. "Claire?" Janet said. "My father is here attempting to retrieve original documents Grandma gave me permission to preserve. He has also stated he intends to challenge her capacity." Silence. Then Janet's voice came through, crisp and cold. "Mr. Whitaker, this is Janet Brooks, attorney at law. Do not touch the documents. Do not pressure Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker. Leave the property now. If you believe you have a legal claim, make it through counsel." My father looked at the phone like it had betrayed him personally. Then he pointed at me. "You have no idea what you're doing." I looked at the tin box, at the deed, at the letters, at the unopened birthday card from a mother to a son who had been told she never wanted him. "Yes," I said, "I do." He left without another word. But the door had barely closed before my phone buzzed with an email from my mother. Subject: for Grandma's protection. Attached was a document from a local attorney I had never heard of. A petition draft questioning Grandma Eleanor's mental capacity and requesting temporary control over her financial affairs. I read it once. Then again. They were not just denying the truth. They were trying to bury the witness before she could speak it in a room that mattered. I forwarded the email to Janet. Her reply came in less than a minute. Now we move fast. I looked toward the stairs where Grandma slept, then back at the red tin box. Christmas had given me the truth. Now my family was going to court to take it back. Probate court does not look like justice in the movies. There are no marble pillars, no dramatic staircases, no jury gasping in perfect timing when the villain finally breaks. The Franklin County Probate Court was beige walls, fluorescent lights, a metal detector that beeped at belt buckles, and a waiting area where families sat beside each other like strangers at a bus station. That was where my family came to pretend this was about protecting my grandmother. My father arrived first in a navy suit I recognized from Easter services and funerals, the costume he wore whenever he wanted people to mistake dignity for honesty. My mother came beside him in a cream coat and pearl earrings, her face pale but carefully arranged. She had always been good at looking wounded without looking guilty. Caleb came alone. That was the first thing I noticed. No Abby. He sat 2 rows behind my parents, not with them. His beard had grown in along his jaw, and his eyes looked like he had not slept since Christmas Eve. He didn't look at me at first. He looked at the floor, both hands clasped between his knees, as if he were holding himself together by force. Grandma Eleanor was not there in person. Janet had insisted on that. The doctor had provided a letter saying the stress of appearing physically in court could worsen her condition, but that she was alert, oriented, and capable of giving sworn testimony by video. My father's attorney had objected, of course. People who plan to call an old woman confused prefer doing it while she is too tired to defend herself. The judge allowed the video statement. That was the first small crack. Janet sat beside me with 2 binders, a yellow legal pad, and the calm expression of a woman who had eaten men like my father for breakfast and found them under-seasoned. She did not tell me everything would be fine. Good lawyers don't make promises the law has not signed off on. Instead, she touched the top binder once and said, "Let the record do its job." I nodded. That had been my whole plan since Christmas morning. Not revenge, not theater, a record. My father's attorney opened by calling the matter a tragic misunderstanding created by an estranged granddaughter at a vulnerable time in an elderly woman's life. He said my grandmother had been pressured, that I had exploited her frailty, that old memories can become distorted near the end of life. He described me as legally sophisticated, which sounded like a compliment until he used it like a weapon. He painted a clean picture. Harold and Diane Whitaker, devoted caregivers, Caleb, the nephew they lovingly raised as a son, Eleanor, aging and confused, Claire, distant for years, suddenly appearing when real estate became involved. It was almost impressive. Lies sound better when you remove the dates. Then the attorney said, "This is not about some alleged family secret. This is about preventing manipulation of an elderly woman's estate." I wrote the word alleged on my notepad and underlined it. Janet saw me do it. When it was her turn, she stood slowly. "Your Honor," she said, "this is about manipulation, but not by my client." She did not raise her voice. Janet never did. She spoke the way a surgeon cuts, cleanly, with purpose, and without asking the room to admire the blood. She began with the simplest thing, the deed. On the screen, she displayed the quitclaim deed my family had handed me on Christmas Eve. My name was highlighted. The $1 consideration was highlighted. The waiver of future claims was highlighted. Then she displayed the family settlement agreement, prepared before dinner, before any neutral attorney had reviewed it, before Grandma Eleanor had privately confirmed what she wanted. Miss Whitaker was asked to sign this during a holiday gathering, Janet said, without counsel, without prior review, in a room full of relatives pressuring her to comply. My father's attorney objected to the word pressuring. The judge looked at Janet. "Rephrase." Janet nodded. In a room where every person present, except Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker, had an interest in Miss Whitaker signing quickly. That stayed in. I felt my father look at me from across the aisle. I did not look back. Next came Grandma's trust. The trust documents were older than I expected. Grandma had created them after my grandfather died, not because she was rich, but because she had seen enough families turn sentimental over property to know sentiment works better with signatures. The house on Maple Ridge Lane was placed into the trust. The beneficiaries were listed clearly. Caleb had a portion. I had a portion. My mother had a limited interest. My father had none. None. That was the word that made his face tighten. Not little. Not less. None. Janet explained that Harold Whitaker had no legal authority to direct distribution of the property, no right to demand I waive my interest, and no right to control the original documents Grandma had given me for preservation. Then she moved to the petition they had filed, the one questioning Grandma's capacity. My father's attorney tried to frame it as concern. Janet let him have that word for about 30 seconds before placing the doctor's letter on the screen. Grandma's physician had evaluated her 2 days after Christmas. The letter stated that Eleanor Whitaker was physically frail but mentally alert, able to identify her relatives, explain her assets, understand the purpose of legal documents, and describe the events of Christmas Eve with consistency. Then came the video. The clerk dimmed the light slightly. My grandmother appeared on the screen, seated in her upstairs bedroom in a blue cardigan. Her hair was brushed, her face was tired, her eyes were clear. A court officer had been present when the video was recorded. Janet asked questions from off-camera. "Mrs. Whitaker, do you know why you are giving this statement?" "Yes," Grandma said, "because my son-in-law and my daughter are trying to say I don't know my own mind." My mother flinched. "Do you know who Claire Whitaker is?" "My granddaughter." "Do you know who Caleb Whitaker is?" Grandma closed her eyes for 1 second. "My grandson," though not in the way he was told. The courtroom changed, not loudly, not visibly to anyone who wasn't listening for it. But I heard it, the small shift of bodies, the pause before pens touched paper again, the atmosphere of a room realizing the story might be larger than the petition. Janet asked, "Can you explain what you mean?" Grandma looked straight into the camera. "Caleb was born to my daughter Marlene. His father is Harold Whitaker. Harold was married to my daughter Diane at the time. We hid it. I helped hide it. Marlene did not abandon him. She was pressured to leave." My father's attorney objected. The judge allowed the statement for the limited purpose of capacity and context. Limited purpose or not, everyone had heard it. Grandma continued, "I kept letters. I kept hospital papers. I kept proof because I was a coward, not because I was confused. A confused woman does not hide evidence for 35 years. A guilty one does." For the first time, my mother began to cry without sound. Grandma's recorded voice softened. "I told the truth at Christmas because they were trying to get Claire to sign away part of my house. They already took from her once. They used money meant for her education to fix a shame they created. I was wrong to let it happen then. I am trying not to die wrong." The video ended. No one moved. My father stared at the screen after it went dark, like he could force her image to come back and say something more useful. Janet let the silence sit. That was one of the things I loved about her. She understood that truth sometimes needs room to echo. Then she opened the second binder, the college account. I had not expected that part to hurt in court. I thought I had already absorbed it at Grandma's kitchen table. But seeing the statements enlarged on a screen under fluorescent lights made it feel less like memory and more like theft. There was my name, Claire Ann Whitaker. There were the withdrawals. There was my father's signature. There was the cashier's check to Stanton and Lowe Family Services. There was another withdrawal 3 months later, matching almost exactly the down payment on Caleb's red truck. Janet did not accuse. She did not need to. She placed the bank record beside the vehicle bill of sale my grandmother had kept in the box for reasons I still could not fully understand. Maybe guilt makes archivists of people. Maybe Grandma had always known the day would come when the paper would have to speak because she had not. Janet said, "We are not asking this court today to resolve every financial issue. We are asking the court to prevent further transfer of trust property under pressure, to recognize Mrs. Whitaker's independent counsel, and to require full accounting before any distribution or waiver is considered." My father's attorney stood again, smoother now but less certain. He said families make difficult choices. He said old transactions should not be dragged into a current estate matter. He said my grandmother's guilt had made her suggestible. He said I had an obvious financial interest in making my parents look bad. Then Caleb stood. No one expected it. Not me, not my parents, not even the judge who looked over her glasses. "Sir," she said. "Are you represented?" Caleb swallowed. "No, Your Honor. I just need to say something." My father turned sharply. "Sit down." Caleb did not. That may have been the first time in his life that the room did not obey my father on his behalf. The judge studied him. "I will allow a brief statement if counsel has no objection." My father's attorney looked like he objected to the entire bloodline, but he said nothing. Caleb stepped forward. "My name is Caleb Whitaker," he said. Then he stopped. His face changed. "At least that's the name I was given." My mother covered her mouth. Caleb looked at the judge, not at her. "I don't know what is legally relevant. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what happens with the house. But I know I was told my mother abandoned me, and I found out on Christmas Eve that there were letters I never got. I found out my father was not who I thought he was, and also exactly who he was somehow. I found out Claire lost things because of decisions made around me that I didn't know about." His voice cracked on my name. Then he looked at me. I thought she hated me. I looked down. I think maybe she hated the bill they kept handing her with my name on it. The courtroom went still again. Caleb turned toward my father. "I don't want the house this way." Harold stood halfway. "Caleb, stop." Caleb looked at him. "You don't get to use me anymore." For 35 years, Caleb had been the reason I had to give up my room, my savings, my resentment, my questions. Now he had taken himself out of their hands, and for the first time my parents had to stand there without him as cover. They looked smaller than I expected. The judge called a recess. 20 minutes in the hallway felt like 20 years. My mother tried to approach Caleb once. He stepped away. My father spoke to his attorney in a hard whisper. Janet reviewed her notes. I sat on a wooden bench and watched snow collect against the courthouse windows. Caleb came over eventually. He stood in front of me for several seconds before sitting down. "I'm sorry," he said. I almost told him it wasn't his fault. The sentence rose automatically, trained by years of protecting him from discomfort. But it was not that simple, so I told him the truth. "You didn't create it," I said. "But you lived inside it better than I did." He nodded. "I know." That was the first honest thing we had ever had between us. When court resumed, the judge gave her ruling carefully. The quitclaim deed and settlement agreement would have no effect. No transfer of the Maple Ridge property could proceed without review. Grandma Eleanor would be represented by independent counsel, not anyone selected by Harold or Diane. The trust assets would be frozen pending accounting. Harold and Diane were ordered to produce records related to any attempted management of Eleanor's property, any communications about the deed, and any financial documents connected to the disputed education account to the extent legally available. Then the judge looked at my father. "As for Mrs. Whitaker's capacity," she said, "the evidence before this court today does not support the claim that she is incompetent merely because she has chosen to reveal information others preferred remain hidden." My father's face went red. The judge was not finished. Family discomfort is not incapacity. That sentence landed like a gavel before the gavel itself came down. Afterward, in the hallway, my father finally lost the mask. He walked toward me with my mother just behind him, crying openly now. "You tore this family apart," he said. His voice was low, but people turned. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel younger than him. "No," I said. "I found the seam." His eyes flickered. "You think paperwork makes you righteous?" "No," I said, "but it makes you traceable." He had no answer for that. People like my father were powerful in kitchens and living rooms, in conversations where no one was writing anything down. But in a courthouse, with dates and signatures and witnesses, power had to produce a receipt. And his did. My mother whispered, "Claire, please, we can still fix this." I looked at her. "What exactly do you want to fix? The lie, or the part where people found out?" She started crying harder. For years that would have moved me, or at least made me feel cruel for not moving. That day it just sounded like noise. Caleb walked past them without stopping. At the end of the hallway he turned back toward me. "I'm going to Kentucky," he said. I knew what he meant. Marlene, his mother, the woman they had turned into a ghost so my father could stay a husband and my mother could stay a martyr. "Do you want me to come?" I asked. He hesitated. Then he shook his head. "Not yet." It hurt, but I understood. Some truths have to be met alone first. I watched him leave through the courthouse doors into the gray afternoon. My father called his name once. Caleb did not turn around. That was when I realized the house had not been the real inheritance my parents were fighting over. It was the story. The story where Harold was honorable, Diane was selfless, Caleb was rescued, and I was selfish for remembering the cost. By the end of that hearing, they had not lost everything, but they had lost that. And for people who survive by controlling the story, that is the first real ruin. Caleb went to Kentucky 3 days after the hearing. He did not ask my parents for permission. That alone told me the ground had shifted. For 35 years, every major decision in his life had passed through them first: where he lived, what he believed, who he blamed, who he thanked. Even his grief had been assigned to him before he was old enough to hold it properly. Marlene abandoned you. Your Aunt Claire resents you. Your grandparents saved you. Your parents sacrificed everything. It was amazing how complete a lie could sound when it was repeated in the same voice for long enough. I did not go with him. I wanted to. More than I admitted. Part of me wanted to sit beside him in the car, keep the printed directions steady in my lap, and make sure he did not turn around halfway because the truth became too heavy. But some doors are not yours to open, even if you found the key. So I stayed in Columbus and did what I knew how to do. I worked the file. Janet and I spent the next several weeks pulling together records, answering discovery requests, and sorting through the accounting my parents had been ordered to produce. They produced it badly, of course. People who have lived for years inside a lie often think confusion is a defense. There were missing statements, vague explanations, cash withdrawals labeled household expenses, a handwritten list from my mother that included phrases like support for Caleb, family stability, and necessary legal matters, as if soft words could make old theft less measurable. Janet read the list once and slid it back across her desk. "They're still trying to write a story," she said. I looked at the numbers. "We'll write the index." That became our work. Not emotional, not dramatic, just dates, signatures, withdrawals, and the quiet patience of paper. We did not prove every wrong thing that had ever happened in that house. No one ever does. There are childhood losses no court can value because no statement shows the exact cost of being told you matter less. But we proved enough. The trust remained frozen until Grandma's independent attorney reviewed everything. The quitclaim deed died exactly where it belonged, in a file marked void, unsigned, and useless. My parents were blocked from controlling Grandma's property. The house on Maple Ridge Lane stayed in the trust, protected from Harold's hands and Diane's tears. As for the money from my education account, that moved into a separate claim. It was not simple. Nothing involving old family money ever is. Some records were too old, some explanations had been buried under time. But enough remained for my father to stop pretending there had been no account, no withdrawals, no benefit to him. When the settlement came months later, it did not make me whole. Money rarely does. A check can reimburse a balance. It cannot return the girl sitting at a kitchen table watching her future get handed away because everyone had agreed she was strong enough to lose it. Still, I deposited it, not because it fixed anything, because refusing repayment would have been one more way of protecting people who had never protected me. Grandma Eleanor died in early spring. It happened on a Tuesday morning, soft and ordinary, after a night nurse told us she had been asking for the window to be opened. She wanted fresh air. That was what the nurse said. She wanted to hear birds. By then, the Maple Ridge house had been legally secured. Grandma had met twice with independent counsel. She had signed a final letter of intent, not changing everything in anger, not punishing Caleb for being born into someone else's sin, but making one thing clear: no one would receive anything through pressure, silence, or performance. Her final plan was not equal. It was fair. There is a difference. Caleb received a share. So did I. Marlene, who had never expected to be named in anything connected to that family again, was given a small amount and a handwritten apology sealed in a white envelope. Grandma left my mother nothing directly, not because she hated her daughter, but because Diane had spent too many years turning guilt into a weapon. Harold received nothing at all. I thought that would feel satisfying. It mostly felt quiet. At the funeral, my parents sat in the front row like mourners in a painting. My mother cried into a lace handkerchief. My father stared straight ahead, jaw locked, refusing to look at me, Caleb, or the woman standing in the back of the church in a plain black dress. Marlene. She had come. I knew because Caleb texted me before the service. She's here. I turned and saw her near the last pew, smaller than I expected, with dark hair streaked silver and both hands wrapped around a program. She did not try to walk to the front. She did not make a scene. She stood in the place people stand when they are not sure grief still has a chair saved for them. Caleb saw her too. For a long time he did not move. Then, just before the first hymn, he stood and walked to the back of the church. My father's head snapped toward him. My mother whispered his name. Caleb did not stop. He reached Marlene, and for several seconds they only looked at each other. She touched his face with one hand, carefully, like she was afraid he might disappear if she moved too fast. He did not hug her. Not then, but he did not step away. That was enough for one morning. After the service, my mother found me beside Grandma's grave. The cemetery sat on a hill outside town, brown grass showing through patches of melting snow. The air smelled like wet earth and lilies. People stood in small clusters, speaking softly, doing that strange, polite dance grief requires when half the mourners are also witnesses. Diane approached me alone, without Harold. That was new. She looked older than she had at Christmas. Not softer, just older. I waited. She folded her hands in front of her, twisting her wedding ring. I hope you're satisfied. There it was, not an apology, a bill. I looked at the coffin, at the flowers, at Caleb across the lawn speaking quietly with Marlene. No, I said. Satisfied is not the word. You humiliated us. You were exposed. Her mouth trembled. You have no idea what it was like to stay, to look at that child every day and know what he represented. For the first time, she said something that sounded almost true. I turned to her. Then you should have been angry at Dad. I was, I said. You were angry near him. You aimed it at me. She flinched. I did not enjoy that. I want to be honest about it. There was no clean pleasure in finally saying the sentence I had carried for years. It did not make me feel powerful. It made me feel tired. But tired truth is still truth. My mother wiped under one eye. I raised him. You did. I stayed. You did. I kept this family together. That was the lie she needed most, the one she still could not put down. I looked at the church behind us, at my father standing alone beside the black car, at Caleb and Marlene speaking like two people learning a language that should have been theirs from the beginning. No, I said. You kept the secret together. The family was what it cost. She stared at me, and for 1 second I saw the woman under the performance. Not the mother I wanted, not the villain she had become in my head. Just a person who had made a terrible bargain and spent 35 years demanding everyone else call it love. Then the mask returned. You'll regret this someday. I thought about that. Maybe I would regret parts of it. The timing, the damage, the fact that Grandma had died with apologies still unfinished in her mouth, the fact that Caleb had to rebuild himself from documents and unanswered letters, the fact that Marlene lost a son for decades because the adults around her preferred reputation to repair. But I would not regret refusing to sign. I would not regret opening the box. I would not regret making the record louder than the lie. No, I said, I'll remember it clearly. She walked away. A year passed. Not cleanly. Not easily. Caleb did meet Marlene again. Then again after that. The first meetings were awkward, careful things in coffee shops and public parks. She brought photographs. He brought questions. Some answers helped. Some made everything worse before they made anything better. He learned that she had named him Nathaniel after her grandfather. He learned she had written every birthday until the letters started coming back unopened. He learned she had believed for years that he hated her because that was what Harold told her. Marlene did not ask him to call her mom. That may be why eventually he did, not in a dramatic moment, not in tears, just once on the phone, months later. Okay, Mom, I'll call you Sunday. He told me about it afterward, embarrassed by his own voice. I told him I was happy for him, and I was. Mostly. Healing is not a clean emotion. Sometimes someone else getting back what was stolen from them reminds you of everything you never will. Caleb and I did not become close overnight. That would be the kind of lie my family used to tell, the kind where a single scene fixes decades because everyone wants the credits to roll. We had lunches that went well and phone calls that ended too fast. We had one argument in August where he said I made him feel guilty for existing, and I said he had no idea how expensive his existence had been for me. Then we both went silent. Then he called back. "I'm sorry," he said. I said, "Me too." That was how we rebuilt, not with one grand apology, with smaller ones, repeated, less pretty, more useful. The next Christmas, I did not go to my parents' house. There was no invitation, and that was a mercy. I spent Christmas Eve in my apartment in Columbus. I bought a small tree from a grocery store lot and decorated it with white lights and no family ornaments. No inherited angels, no childhood stockings, nothing with a story someone else could rewrite. Around 7, there was a knock at my door. Caleb stood in the hallway holding a bakery box and wearing the same charcoal coat from the Christmas. Everything broke. He looked nervous. "Marlene made pie," he said. "Too much pie. Apparently that's genetic." I stepped aside. He came in, and for a moment we were both careful with the silence. Then he placed the box on my kitchen counter and pulled something from his pocket. A small ornament, a silver key. I looked at it. He shrugged. "For Grandma's house." After the trust settled, the Maple Ridge house had been sold. Not to Caleb, not to me. To a young family with 2 kids and a dog that immediately dug under the fence. The money had been distributed according to Grandma's final plan. The house itself was gone from us, which felt right. Some places hold too many echoes to ask anyone to live there honestly. I hung the silver key on my little tree. It caught the light. Caleb stood beside me. "I hated you for a while," he said. "I know. I think I hated you because you had proof, and I only had feelings. That's usually how families get away with things." He gave a small laugh. Then he looked at the ornament. "She should have told us sooner. Grandma?" "All of them." I nodded. Yes, that was the truth at the center of everything. Not that one person lied. They all did. Some loudly, some silently, some with signatures, some with envelopes left unopened, some by accepting the version of peace that required a child to keep paying for it. Caleb stayed for coffee. We ate Marlene's pie on paper plates because I had not planned for guests, and that felt more honest than setting a perfect table. Before he left, he paused at the door. "Claire? Yeah? I don't know if I was your brother." I looked at him for a long moment. All my life, that word had been used to take from me. Brother. It had meant give him the room. Give him the money. Give him grace. Give him Grandma's house. Give him your silence. But standing there in my doorway, Caleb was not asking for anything. That changed the word. "I don't know either," I said, "but maybe we can find out without lying this time." His eyes shone, but he smiled. "I'd like that." After he left, I stood in the quiet apartment and looked at the silver key on the tree. My family raised my cousin as my brother and called it kindness. Then Grandma told the truth at Christmas, and I learned that kindness without honesty is just another costume. For years they told me family meant sacrifice. Now I know better. Family is not the person who asks you to bleed quietly so the table looks peaceful. Family is not the story people repeat until the victim sounds selfish for remembering the wound. Family is not a house, a name, a secret, or a lie old enough to look like tradition. Family is who tells the truth when silence would be easier. It is who gives back what was never theirs. It is who opens the box, reads the record, and refuses to hand the pen to the wrong person again. That Christmas, I lost the family story I had been given, but I kept the truth. And sometimes when a lie has been sitting at the table for 35 years, the bravest thing you can do is pull out the chair, look it straight in the face, and ask who invited it.